Hey, what's going on, y'all? I just wanted to do a quick video because uh, there's a lot of mysticism that is occurring in the black community about our economic reality and what we have the capacity to do about it. And so, one of the things Carter G. Woodson talked about in his book, The Miseducation of the Negro. In The Miseducation of the Negro, Carter G. Woodson talked about how that we keep trying to create new ways to do things, right? That black people in America keep trying to create these new ways to do things instead of following the course that history has already shown to be beneficent, right? And so when when we talk about the economic condition of black people, you have to understand that we exist in a country that for years, for hundreds of years, have had economic sanctions placed on us. For years, the black community has had economic sanctions placed on us for nothing more than being black. Right? Not because we were anti-American or we were against America or because we didn't marry properly or because we weren't righteous enough or because we weren't smart enough. None of those reasons. All of those were excuses that were used to justify placing those sanctions on black people. Okay? So you have to understand that first. So it's not that we didn't do anything. It's that something was done to us and is being done to us. So you have to understand that. And until that is addressed, it doesn't matter what we do. The system is designed in a way to which anything can be done to us. And until we correct that, it don't matter what we do. They'll just rob us. They'll just keep robbing us. They'll keep robbing us because they can do that. All right, so let's start there. So really what I want to talk about is how America was essentially built. Right? So we know slavery. Without slavery, there is no America. But let's put that to the side for a second. And let's talk about how white America was built. So anytime that you're trying to build, particularly on a national scale, a large nation, you have to provide to the society opportunities. You have to provide to them opportunities. Because, I don't know, man, like, a very small percentage of people are going to be responsible for the way we live. A very small percentage of people are going to be responsible for the way we live. And what I mean by that is, when you talk about our modern economy, you're talking about Jeff Bezos, you're talking about Warren Buffett, you're talking about Mark Zuckerberg. Like, these are, what's the guy who just passed from Apple? The Apple founder. Anyway, people like that are the people who are responsible for the way we live, right? Like, I'm on my phone right now communicating through you because of Mark Zuckerberg. Not because of the masses of the population created Facebook. No, it was Mark Zuckerberg. But when you have an early nation, you don't know who Mark Zuckerberg is in the population. You don't know who that person is. So you can't just go up to a person, give them money and say, hey, Mark, can you create Facebook? Right? That's not how it works. Or Steve Jobs, can you create Apple? You know, or Bill Gates, can you create Microsoft? That's not how it works. Finding people who are the innovators of society or your particular community requires essentially that you dump opportunity to the masses. And then what will happen is, once you dump those opportunities to the masses, the resources will find their way to the people who know how to best utilize those people. So when you talk about the 1% are usually people who are most equipped to maximize the potential that is given to the whole of the people. So in 1862, President Abraham Lincoln signed into law the 1862 Homestead Act. What the 1862 Homestead Act did was, and I've talked to you about this before, so I'm going to try to make this really short. The 1862 Homestead Act said, all right, we're just going to throw these opportunities out to the nation, right? And so people were able to get land for nothing more than a filing fee. Now you have to understand, this is 1862, so you know already who was excluded from that act. You know who was excluded from that act, because it was 1862. We didn't get our freedom until 1865 and technically 1866. And there were some people, there was some situations where even then that wasn't the case when you talk about Juneteenth and things of that nature. So the point, and there were some people who were on the plantation, and they say, some people say until 1970, but if you factor in like sharecropping and things of that nature, then that you can find that to be actually true. Anyway, so what happened is everybody had this opportunity to get this land. All you had to pay is the filing fee, and you had to stay on the land for 5 years. Once you stayed on the land for 5 years, the land was yours. But if you turned a profit before the 5 years, you could actually buy the land from the government very cheap before the 5 years was up. Obviously, that wasn't what happened with most people. Most people had to live on the farmland. If you want to know what that looked like, one of the shows that I used to watch as a kid that is a reflection of that is Little House on the Prairie. Little House on the Prairie was an example of the Homestead Act, the 1862 Homestead Act that benefited white people. And there was some shows on Little House on the Prairie where they did address race to a small degree. So just to kind of give you if you know Little House on the Prairie, then you understand what I'm talking about. Anyway, so what you do is you give out all these opportunities, and then you just sit back and see who rises to the top, right? And the people who rise to the top are going to take the resources from the people who lose the resources, because there's going to be a bunch of people who are going to lose. They are going to lose. And a lot of people, something like, I don't know, man, 70% of people in the Homestead Act lost their land. All you had to do was live on the land for 5 years, man. You ain't have to do nothing else but live on the land for 5 years. And people couldn't even do that. And so I'm just saying, like, so then the next thing you had happen that was consequential, because there were several Homestead Acts after the 1862 Homestead Act as well. So that wasn't the only one. But the point was, we're going to give opportunities to these people to go out there to see who can do what. Because remember, I told you, you can't find a person and point them out. You have to present the opportunities out there and then see who rises to the top. And so who end up rising to the top were people who were really pretty much already well off. And so what happens is, so you have like the Rockefellers, the J.P. Morgans, the people like that who come from these slave families that own money already, that just sit back and look for people who are going to do the work. And then when they find those people, they say, hey, let me invest in that. And then they take ownership of what you did. But they pay you. You get wealthy and rich off of it. So you good. I only have a few more minutes here. So I just want to... Then you talk about the 1934... In 1934, the New Deal, which included the WPA, the Work Progress Administration, and the FHA, the Federal Housing Administration. These two administrations were again opportunities tossed out to the masses of white people to see who were going to be able to rise to the top. And you have many white people who took advantage of that. So in 1934, the New Deal was established. 30 years later, you had the establishment of organizations like KFC, like McDonald's, like all these places that were these small mom and pop hole in the wall places. But now, because of the FHA and the WPA, white families had excess wealth because of the WPA and the FHA. So now they have money that they can spend, so they turn those hole in the wall places into what we know international corporations today. So McDonald's, international corporations. KFC, international corporations. Coca-Cola, international corporations. All of these places existed before the New Deal, but once the wealth was spread out into the population, then people had access wealth, which turned those institutions into international institutions. Right? Black people, you could not do that. You could not do that. And the reason you could not do that is because you were strategically locked out of the New Deal. You were strategically locked out of the 1862 Homestead Act. So what needs to happen then, so when we talk about reparations, what we're talking about happening is giving black Americans, who are the founders of this country, the opportunity to be what white people are in this country. That's reparations. White people got the Homestead Act, white people got the WPA, white people got the FHA. White people got those things that gave them the opportunity. Now, none of those things assure success, right? Because you have white people, listen, you have white slave owners who lost their plantations. Like, imagine you own a plantation where you don't have to do any of the work. Somebody else got to do all the work, and you still lose it because they gambled and they overinvested. they did everything that a gluttonous person would do, right? They did too much, and so they lost everything. And a lot of times when you talk about black families being broken up during slavery, a lot of that was a result of terrible choices made by slave masters where they lost their plantations. Because you have to understand, for many slave owners, the slave was the mortgage. The slave was the mortgage. So when you defaulted on your mortgage, then so you foreclosed on your slaves, and then your slaves would be sold off to other plantations, right? And that's how they would pay back the debt that was owed for the mortgage on the slaves. So it wasn't just that we were slaves, we were actual property that a mortgage could be taken out on, right? So you have to factor all of that in. I'm saying, black people, you didn't have none of those opportunities. And so what you do as a black person is you just work, right? And not just that you're working, like you working in these areas that really don't pay well. But white people are working off of inheritance. Now, not every white person is working off inheritance, but what I'm saying is when you got somebody like Ray Kroc. Ray Kroc was essentially the founder of the McDonald's as you know it today. Because McDonald's just used to be two hole-in-the-wall clubs, restaurants in California, and he saw them and he said, hey, let's do this. But he was able to look at the landscape in which white people lived, right, where they had this excess wealth, and say, hey, we need to put a McDonald's here, we need to put a McDonald's here, we need to put a McDonald's here. And so he's responsible for spreading McDonald's all across the country. But he didn't make any money off of that. But what he figured out is that every McDonald's store that they open up, that he was kind of like the logistics manager. So he bought the land that McDonald's had to open up on, and then McDonald's leased the land from him. So he became one of the largest real estate moguls in America, not through McDonald's itself, but by leasing the land to McDonald's, to which they lived on. The point I'm trying to make is, all these people coming up with all these schemes about how black people can do this are new ideas. They're new ideas. Somebody said today, invest in the stock market. Let me tell you something about the stock market. The stock market, telling somebody to invest in the stock market is like telling them to go to the casino to build wealth, right? The stock market is a risk. It's a risk. And it's a risk that the vast majority of black people cannot afford to take. It doesn't mean you don't have the money to invest in the stock market. It means you have to be able to invest in the stock market and still live, right? You don't take your last money and invest it in the stock market, because what you gonna eat next week, right? And that's why the people who have money, who have excess money, have the opportunity to invest in the stock market, because they can afford the risk. They can afford the risk. And that's what all of this is about. It's about affording the risk. The stock market is not guaranteed. Opening black businesses is not guaranteed. Businesses open and close all the time. They fail. Circuit City was a multi-billion-dollar industry. It failed. Kmart, a multi-billion-dollar industry. It failed. I'm saying people are giving you solutions that you can't afford. You can't afford their solutions. Reparations will make us whole citizens in America.